My neighbors are absolutely toxic, and I've become addicted to listening to them argue every single night. I know it sounds creepy and weird, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but I'm that nosy neighbor who knows all your business. It's wrong, but I can't stop doing it. And honestly, they've become my favorite form of entertainment. My name is Derek, I'm 32 years old, and I never thought I'd become the kind of person who eavesdrops on his neighbors for fun. But here we are, and let me tell you, what started as an annoying disturbance has turned into the most addictive reality show I've ever watched. Let me take you back to how this whole thing started. When I first moved into my house in Millbrook Heights, a pretty affluent suburb outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, I was excited about finally having my own place. The neighborhood was quiet, well-maintained, with tree-lined streets and houses that actually had decent-sized yards. I'd saved up for years working as a software developer, and this little two-bedroom house with a decent backyard felt like I'd finally made it. My own space, my own rules, peace and quiet after years of apartment living with paper-thin walls. For the first few months, everything was perfect. I'd wake up to birds chirping, have my coffee on the back deck, work from my home office, and enjoy the serenity. My immediate neighbors were an older couple, the Hendersons, who owned the large colonial house next door. They were sweet people who kept to themselves and maintained their property beautifully. Their house had this detached 3-car garage with an apartment above it, and for months it sat empty. Then Wade and Crystal moved in. Let me paint you a picture of Wade and Crystal, because these two are something else entirely. Imagine the trashiest, most stereotypical, drug-abusing daily drama couple you've ever seen on reality TV, but transplant them into this upscale neighborhood where the average home costs $500,000. Wade's probably in his mid-30s, always wearing stained tank tops and cargo shorts, with greasy hair that looks like it hasn't seen shampoo in weeks. Crystal's around the same age, with bleached blonde hair that's grown out to show about 3 inches of dark roots, and she has this habit of screaming everything instead of just talking. They rent that apartment above the Hendersons' garage, and it sits right at the edge of my backyard. There's just a thin line of pine trees between their little outdoor area and my deck, enough that we can't see each other directly, but I can hear absolutely everything they say. And trust me, they say a lot. The thing about Wade and Crystal is that they seem to spend roughly 20 hours a day outside, drinking and doing God knows what substances, and they are completely incapable of having a normal conversation. I'm not exaggerating when I say they can't talk for more than 20 minutes without it escalating into a full-blown screaming match about something completely ridiculous. At first, I hated it with every fiber of my being. Picture this. You're trying to enjoy a peaceful evening on your deck after a long day of work, maybe grilling some chicken, reading a book, just unwinding, and suddenly you hear Crystal's voice cutting through the air like a rusty knife. "Wade, you worthless piece of garbage. Where's my lighter? I know you took my damn lighter." And Wade, in his perpetually slurred voice, would respond, "I didn't take nothing, Crystal. Maybe you lost it 'cause you're always too messed up to remember where you put stuff." This would go on for hours, literally hours. And it wasn't just weekday evenings. Friday and Saturday nights turned into these epic marathon arguing sessions that would start around sunset and go until 3 or 4 in the morning. The first few times it happened, I tried to be understanding. Maybe they were going through a rough patch. Maybe they'd settle down once they got used to the neighborhood. I even considered going over to introduce myself and politely ask if they could keep it down, especially during late night hours. But then I witnessed my first real Wade and Crystal blowout, and I realized this wasn't a temporary situation. This was who they were. It was a Saturday night in July, about 2 months after they'd moved in. I was trying to watch a movie in my living room when I heard Crystal absolutely losing her mind outside. "You lying piece of trash, you promised me you wouldn't touch my stuff, you promised." I muted my TV and listened as Wade tried to defend himself in that mumbling, incoherent way he had when he was really messed up. "Crystal baby, I just had a couple beers, I swear, I didn't take nothing. Don't you dare lie to me. I counted them. I counted every single one and there's 3 missing. 3. This argument went on for 4 straight hours. 4 hours of Crystal screaming accusations and Wade mumbling denials. At one point I heard what sounded like something being thrown and breaking. That's when I decided to call the police for the first time. The officer who came out was polite but basically told me what I'd learned several more times over the next few months. Unless there was evidence of actual domestic violence or property damage, there wasn't much they could do about noise complaints. They'd talk to Wade and Crystal, ask them to keep it down, but that was about it. And here's the kicker. It was pretty obvious I was the one who'd called. I was the only house close enough to hear them clearly, and Wade and Crystal weren't stupid, just incredibly dysfunctional. The next Monday, I came home from work to find that their dog had left several presents in my yard. Fresh ones, right on my front lawn where anyone walking by could see them. Message received, Wade and Crystal. I tried the police route 2 more times over the next month, with similar results. After the 3rd police visit resulted in nothing but more dog poop in my yard and passive-aggressive comments, I had a moment of clarity. I was sitting on my deck one evening, frustrated and ready to just move somewhere else, when I heard Crystal start in on Wade about something involving a missing $20 bill. I had a 20 right here on this table, Wade, and now it's gone. It didn't just walk away by itself. Maybe it blew away. It's windy tonight. A $20 bill doesn't just blow away. Someone took it, and the only someone here is you. And as I listened to this incredibly stupid argument about $20, I realized something. I wasn't just annoyed anymore. I was genuinely entertained. These two were like characters in the world's trashiest soap opera, except they were real people living real lives just 50 feet from my deck. And unlike a TV show, I never knew what was coming next. Would Crystal accuse Wade of stealing her cigarettes? Would Wade threaten to move back in with his mother? It was completely unpredictable. So I made a decision that probably says something questionable about my character. I decided to embrace it. If I couldn't beat them and I couldn't make them stop, I might as well enjoy the show. I started keeping a cooler stocked with beer on my deck. When I'd hear the familiar sound of Crystal's voice starting to rise, I'd grab a cold one, settle into my most comfortable deck chair, and prepare to be entertained. I began to think of them as my own personal reality TV show, available 24/7, with no commercial breaks and absolutely no filter. And you know what? Once I stopped fighting it and started treating it like entertainment, I began to appreciate the bizarre artistry of Wade and Crystal's dysfunction. These two had turned arguing into a performance art. They had recurring themes, character arcs, and plot twists that would make soap opera writers jealous. There was the ongoing saga of Crystal's missing belongings, which could be anything from hair ties to prescription bottles to that one earring she'd been looking for since March. Wade was always the prime suspect, and he was always innocent in his own mind, even when caught red-handed. There was Wade's relationship with his mother, which Crystal used as ammunition in roughly 60% of their arguments. Apparently, Wade's mom thought Crystal was trash, and Crystal had some very colorful opinions about Wade's mom in return. Your mother never liked me, Wade. She thinks she's so much better than me with her fancy job at the bank. Leave my mom out of this, Crystal. She's been nothing but nice to you. Nice? Nice? She told me I should get a real job instead of selling crafts online. The weekend arguments were always the best quality entertainment, mainly because there were often guest stars. Wade's friend Trent would show up sometimes, and Trent was somehow even messier than Wade. Trent had this habit of getting philosophical when he was messed up, leading to bizarre conversations about the meaning of life and government conspiracies. Crystal's sister Melody made occasional appearances too, and Melody seemed to exist solely to tell Crystal that Wade was no good for her, and she should leave him. Melody was probably right, but her timing was always terrible. Crystal, honey, you deserve so much better than this, Melody would say, usually right in the middle of one of Wade and Crystal's epic battles. You're a beautiful, smart woman, and you're wasting your life with this loser. Don't call him a loser, Crystal would respond, immediately defending the same man she'd been screaming at for 3 hours. The most entertaining episodes usually happened on weekend nights when everyone had been drinking for hours, and the arguments became completely surreal. One particularly memorable Saturday night in September, Crystal spent about 3 hours screaming at Wade about how she was a changed woman. She was turning over a new leaf, she said, and wasn't going to take his nonsense anymore. I'm a new woman, Wade. A strong, independent woman who doesn't need your lies and your stealing. Wade's response was about what you'd expect. What are you talking about, Crystal? I didn't take nothing. I just had a few beers. I'm fine. You're just making stuff up like you always do. Crystal threatened to leave, which apparently woke Wade up enough to realize he might actually be in trouble. So he countered with his nuclear option, threatening to take their dog and move back in with his mother. This back and forth went on for about 2 hours, and then, just like that, everything changed. I assume they found some more of whatever substances they'd been missing, because both of their voices suddenly became very mellow. Instead of screaming at each other, they started having this bizarrely calm conversation about their plans for improving the property. You know what we should do, Wade? Crystal said in this completely different, peaceful voice. We should cut down some of those trees over there so we get more sunlight in the morning. Which trees you thinking? Those pine trees between us and that guy's yard. The ones that block our view. Those aren't our trees, Crystal. Those are on his property. So? He's not using them. We'd be doing him a favor. I nearly choked on my beer. They were talking about cutting down my trees. On my property. As the months went by, I started to recognize the patterns in their arguments and almost predict what was coming next. If Crystal accused Wade of stealing something on a Tuesday, by Thursday she'd be threatening to leave him. If Wade threatened to move back in with his mother, by the weekend he'd be apologizing and promising to change. I also started to appreciate the complexity of their relationship, as dysfunctional as it was. There were moments when I'd hear genuine affection in their voices. Times when one of them was sick or upset, and the other would actually be supportive and caring. One night in October I heard Crystal crying. Really crying. Not the dramatic sobbing she did during arguments, but quiet, heartbroken tears. Wade's voice was gentle and concerned as he tried to comfort her. "What's wrong, baby? Talk to me." "My dad called today," Crystal said between sobs. "He's in the hospital again. His liver is getting worse." "Oh, Crystal, I'm sorry. Do you want to go see him?" "I can't afford to fly to Michigan, Wade. We don't have the money." "He's your dad, Crystal. Of course he wants to see you. And we'll figure out the money thing. Maybe I can pick up some extra work this week." "You'd do that for me?" "Of course I would. I love you. You know that." Moments like these reminded me that Wade and Crystal were real people with real problems, not just characters in my entertainment. The holiday season brought some particularly interesting episodes. Christmas brought its own drama, mainly centered around the fact that Wade and Crystal had no money for gifts, but had somehow convinced themselves they could afford to host Christmas dinner. "So we'll get a ham, some potatoes, green bean casserole, rolls, and a couple of pies," Crystal said. "How much is all that gonna cost?" Wade asked. "Maybe $100? That's not too bad." "Crystal, we got $37 in the bank." Winter brought some changes to the Wade and Crystal show. The cold weather meant they spent less time outside, but they seemed to argue inside their apartment just as much. January was particularly brutal. Wade was working less because construction jobs were scarce in the winter, which meant they had even less money than usual and spent even more time together. One particularly cold February night, I heard what I thought was going to be another epic argument starting up. Crystal was crying, and Wade was trying to calm her down. "We can't keep living like this, Wade. Something has to change." "I know, baby, I know. Things will get better when spring comes and I can work more." "But what if they don't? What if this is just how our life is?" And then Wade said something that actually surprised me. "Crystal, listen to me. I know things are hard right now. I know I'm not the man you deserve, and I know I've made a lot of mistakes. But I love you, and I'm not giving up on us. We're gonna get through this because we always do. We're survivors. But I'm tired of just surviving, Wade. I want to actually live. Then we'll make that happen. I'll do whatever it takes." This conversation continued for over an hour, and it was completely different from anything I'd heard from them before. Instead of screaming accusations and threats, they were having an actual honest discussion about their problems and their relationship. For a moment, I felt guilty about eavesdropping. This felt too private, too real for me to be sitting there listening with my beer like it was entertainment. But then March rolled around, Wade got some work, they had a little money again, and within a week they were back to arguing about missing cigarettes and whose turn it was to take out the trash. The cycle continued. Then something happened that changed everything. Crystal got pregnant. I first learned about this during one of their rare quiet conversations on a warm evening in late spring. They were sitting outside talking in hushed tones, which immediately caught my attention because hushed tones were not part of their usual communication style. "Are you sure?" Wade was asking, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard it. "I'm sure," Crystal replied. "I took 3 tests. They were all positive." "Wow, a baby. We're gonna have a baby. Are you happy about it?" Yeah, I think so. Are you?" "I don't know. I'm scared, Wade. We can barely take care of ourselves. How are we gonna take care of a baby?" "We'll figure it out. People have babies all the time. We'll figure it out." This conversation continued for hours, and it was unlike anything I'd heard from them before. They talked about their fears, their hopes, their complete lack of financial resources. Wade promised to get steady work and stop drinking. Crystal promised to quit smoking and start eating better. They made plans to clean up their lives and become the kind of people who could raise a child. The pregnancy news had an immediate impact on their relationship dynamic. Their arguments became less frequent and more focused on practical concerns rather than abstract drama. Instead of fighting about missing belongings or imagined slights, they argued about doctor's appointments and prenatal vitamins. "Crystal, you missed your appointment again yesterday." "I forgot, Wade. I had a lot on my mind." "You can't forget doctor's appointments when you're pregnant." Don't lecture me about how pregnancy works. I'm the one who's pregnant. And I'm the father, so I get to care about whether you're taking care of yourself. Even their arguments were more mature somehow. Wade was stepping up in ways I'd never seen before, taking responsibility and showing genuine concern for Crystal's health and their future. The autumn months brought some of the most interesting episodes of the Wade and Crystal show, as they tried to navigate pregnancy while dealing with their existing problems. Money was tighter than ever, with doctors' visits and prenatal expenses adding to their already strained budget. The insurance doesn't cover everything, Wade. We're gonna owe like $500. Where are we supposed to get $500? Maybe you could ask your mom for a loan. My mom already thinks I'm a screw-up. If I ask her for money for a baby, she's gonna want to be involved in everything. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing. Maybe we need someone with opinions about how we should live. These conversations were happening more frequently, with both Wade and Crystal starting to acknowledge that their current lifestyle wasn't sustainable with a baby coming. In November, they had the gender reveal during one of their outdoor conversations. "It's a girl," Crystal announced, her voice filled with wonder and excitement. "A girl? We're having a daughter. We're having a daughter. What are we gonna name her? What about Hazel? I always liked the name Hazel. Hazel's nice. Hazel May? Hazel May. I like that." Even their disagreements about baby names were more light-hearted and loving than their old arguments about missing cigarettes. Christmas brought the holidays and another visit from Crystal's sister Melody. But this time the dynamic was completely different. Instead of staging an intervention, Melody came to help Crystal prepare for the baby. "You two seem different," Melody observed. "More settled, I guess." "We are different," Crystal replied. "We had to be. We're gonna be parents. Wade, I owe you an apology. I said some pretty harsh things about you in the past." "You weren't wrong," Wade admitted. "I was a mess. We both were. But we're trying to do better now." January brought the final chapter when Crystal went into labor 3 weeks early. I heard Wade panicking as he tried to get her to the hospital. "Crystal, are you sure it's time?" "Wade, my water broke. This is not false labor. Get the car. Do you have the hospital bag? It's by the door. And call my sister." I didn't hear from them for 3 days. On the 4th day, I heard Wade's truck pull into the driveway, followed by the sound of excited voices. Crystal was home from the hospital with the baby. "She's so tiny," Wade was saying, his voice full of wonder. "She's perfect," Crystal replied. "Look at her little fingers. Hazel May. I like how that sounds." The first few weeks with baby Hazel brought a whole new type of dynamic. Instead of arguing about missing belongings or money problems, they were having conversations about feeding schedules and diaper changes and whether the baby's crying was normal. "She's been crying for 2 hours, Crystal. Something must be wrong." Babies cry, Wade. That's what they do. But what struck me most was how much they supported each other. When Crystal was too tired to get up for a nighttime feeding, Wade would handle it without complaint. When Wade was frustrated with the baby's crying, Crystal would take over and give him a break. "Wade, thank you for getting up with her last night." "Of course, Crystal. We're in this together. I don't know how people do this. I feel like I don't know anything about being a mother." "You're a great mother, Crystal. Look at how much she loves you." By the summer, Hazel was a few months old, and the Wade and Crystal show had evolved into something completely different. Their conversations were about baby milestones and plans for Hazel's future, rather than dramatic accusations and threats. One warm July evening, as I sat on my deck with my usual beer, I realized something profound had happened. I wasn't listening to Wade and Crystal argue anymore because they weren't arguing. They were having normal conversations about normal things, like any other couple with a baby. "Hazel smiled at me today," Crystal was telling Wade, her voice full of joy. "A real smile, not just gas." "She's getting so big," Wade replied. "We should probably start looking at bigger places again. I've been saving up." "Really? You think we're ready for that?" "I think we've been ready for a while, Crystal. We've proven we can do this. We can take care of Hazel, we can take care of each other. It's time to start living like the family we've become." As I listened to this conversation, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was genuinely happy for Wade and Crystal. They'd overcome incredible dysfunction to become loving parents and partners. But I also felt a sense of loss. The Wade and Crystal show, which had been a constant source of fascination for almost 2 years, was ending. A few weeks later, I got confirmation that the show was truly over when I noticed a "For Rent" sign go up in front of the Hendersons' house. Wade and Crystal were moving out, finally getting their own place. On their last day in the neighborhood, something unexpected happened. I was watering my plants when I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Wade walking toward my fence, carrying baby Hazel. "Hey, neighbor," he said, smiling. "I wanted to come say goodbye before we moved out." "Oh, you're moving today?" "Yeah, we found a little house about 10 minutes from here. 2 bedrooms, a real yard for Hazel to play in when she gets older." "That's great. Congratulations." "Thanks. And I wanted to apologize for all the noise over the past couple years. I know we weren't the best neighbors." I looked at Wade holding his daughter. This man who'd transformed from a chaotic, dysfunctional person into someone who was taking responsibility and making mature decisions. "Don't worry about it," I told him. "Everyone goes through rough patches." "Yeah, but we went through ours pretty loudly," he said with a laugh. "Crystal and I, we were in a bad place for a while, but Hazel changed everything for us. She made us want to be better people." Hazel made a little cooing sound, and Wade's face lit up with pure love and pride. "She's beautiful," I said. "She really is. She's the best thing we ever did." Crystal appeared, carrying a box of belongings. "Wade, the truck's ready." Then she noticed me and waved. "Oh, hi! We're finally getting out of your hair." "Good luck with the new place," I called back. "Thank you for being patient with us," she said, and there was genuine gratitude in her voice. As I watched Wade and Crystal load their belongings into their truck, with baby Hazel secured in her car seat, I reflected on the journey I'd witnessed over the past 2 years. I'd started out viewing them as entertainment, as characters in my personal reality show, but somewhere along the way, they'd become real people to me, flawed, struggling people who'd found love and purpose in each other and their daughter. The Wade and Crystal show was ending, but their real story was just beginning. They were driving away to start their new life as a family, leaving behind the chaos and dysfunction that had defined their early relationship. As their truck pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the street, I realized something about myself too. I'd spent 2 years being the nosy neighbor who eavesdropped on other people's drama because it was easier than dealing with the loneliness in my own life. Listening to Wade and Crystal's problems had distracted me from examining my own, but watching them grow and change had inspired me in ways I hadn't expected. If Wade and Crystal could overcome their dysfunction and build something beautiful together, maybe I could work on building something meaningful in my own life too. The next evening, I sat on my deck with my usual beer, but instead of listening for drama from the neighbors, I found myself in complete silence. The garage apartment was empty, and for the first time in 2 years, my backyard was peaceful. A few months later, I ran into Wade at the grocery store. He was pushing a cart with Hazel in the baby seat, picking out ingredients for what looked like a home-cooked meal. He looked healthier than I'd ever seen him. "Derek, hey, how are you doing?" "I'm good. How's the new place?" "It's amazing. Hazel has her own room, and there's a backyard where she can play. Crystal's talking about starting a garden next spring." "That sounds wonderful." "It is. You know, moving out of that garage apartment was the best thing we ever did. Not just because of the space, but because it felt like we were finally taking control of our lives." "I can see that. You look happy." "I am happy. We both are. For the first time in years, we're actually happy." Their story reminded me that people aren't fixed entities. We're all capable of growth and change, even when we seem stuck in destructive patterns. Wade and Crystal had seemed hopeless when I first started listening to them, but they'd found hope in love and responsibility, and the desire to be worthy of their daughter's respect. What I learned from Wade and Crystal is that everyone's fighting battles we can't see, and sometimes the most chaotic, dysfunctional people are just one opportunity away from becoming the heroes of their own stories. They taught me that love, even messy and imperfect love, can be transformative when it's paired with genuine commitment to growth. They also taught me something about myself. I realized that being the observer of other people's lives isn't a substitute for living your own life fully. The entertainment I found in their drama was really just a way of avoiding the work of building meaningful connections in my own world. Today, my deck is still my favorite place to unwind after work. But instead of listening for neighborhood drama, I use that time to read, to think, to call friends and family I'd been neglecting. The silence that once felt empty now feels full of possibility. Sometimes I wonder how Wade and Crystal and little Hazel are doing in their new house. I hope they're still growing together, still choosing each other and their family every day. Their story changed from a source of entertainment to a lesson about resilience, love, and the possibility of redemption. They reminded me that we're all works in progress, all capable of writing better chapters in our own stories if we're brave enough to change.